Welcome everybody. Welcome to Thursday Book Club. For anybody who's new watching me now or watching me later, my name is Suzanne Leal. I'm the author of the novels The Deceptions, the Border Street and The Teacher's Secret. So to give a bit of background for Thursday Book Club, I started the book club in 2020 just as COVID hit. It sort of struck me at the time that people really needed a bit of an outlet. It was before we had Zoom fatigue. It was right at the cutting edge of it all. And it seemed that there was a need to get people together. And the only way we could do it, obviously, was online. So that was the birth of Thursday Book Club. And a lot of you have been here almost from the beginning. And it's been a delight to have friendships develop online, and then to have once a month a guest come to join us to talk about their work. So I'm very delighted today to be introducing you to Michelle Thom. Michelle Thom is the author of this very beautiful memoir, which is called 10,000 Aftershocks. Welcome to you, Michelle.
Thanks, Suzanne.
The first question I had really is about the cover. I'll just show it again. It's a really arresting cover. And when I looked at it, when it came in the mail, it reminded me of a book that I'd read some years ago, which is The Museum of Modern Love by Heather Rose. It had the same almost Art Deco print. And I looked, and for people, you probably know that you can find the designer's name generally on the inside of the novel. And it's by Sandy Cull, who was indeed Heather Rose's cover designer as well. And in fact, my designer from my first book, Border Street. So when you first saw this cover, what did you think?
Well, I loved it. They asked me what I wanted, and I actually found a picture of a crack in the earth that sort of looked a bit like a tree. And I thought that might be, nice to reference both stories because it does follow two lines. And of course, they took my suggestion and just threw it out the window and did whatever they wanted. So that was fine. Apparently, that's quite normal. I must say that when I first saw it, I felt kind of ill, and I thought that was a good thing. And I think it's because of that movement that sort of registers in the way she's done that shimmery bit at the top and the bottom. And it was just so reminiscent of how it felt to be in an earthquake. And I just thought, well, if it has that effect on me, I think that's actually a real positive, because in some way it's reflecting that horrible sensation that you have, that you live with and you fear. So I said I love it, and my agent said she loved it, and so they said great, and that was the end of the discussion. So it was very easy. Yeah, and she's actually shortlisted or finalist for the non-fiction category in the Design Awards this year. So I was really thrilled for Sandy.
Oh, that's fabulous. She's very talented. It's such a difficult art, that cover design art, because you're writing something that is going to attract the eye, that has meaning, that's not too busy. So it's I'm always fascinated by what they come up with.
And I had to laugh because my name is on it multiple times, and after that, one of my friends, every time she texted me, would say, "Hello, Michelle Thom, Michelle Thom, Michelle Thom." So
good to have it on too many times, not enough time on the cover.
Thank you.
As you've said, this book is about partly your experiences in the Christchurch earthquake in 2011 and the very many aftershocks that followed. It's also a book about you and your family, a very intimate, often confronting book. What I'd like to do is start with the earthquake. Can you set the scene for us? Where were you when the earthquake struck?
It was quite a momentous day because I have 4 children, and it was my youngest son's first day of primary school. So he'd gone for the morning, and my husband had taken the day off work so that he could help me drop him off and collect him again. And we'd gone to school, picked him up, and as a reward, we'd stopped off at a Subway store on the way home and picked up sandwiches. And we were just at home eating them. Greg and I were sitting at the table, and my son was sitting at breakfast bar. And we'd already had, so backing up a little bit, we'd already had, this was February 2011. In September 2010, we'd already had a large earthquake at about 4:30 in the morning. It had woken everybody up, and luckily nobody was killed, but there was a lot of damage. So we knew what a big earthquake felt like, and so we were sitting there eating, and one started up, and of course we were used to aftershocks from the other one, and there was just always a moment where you're like, okay, is this going to just fade again, go away, or is this going to build? And very quickly it became obvious it was just building and building and building and building. And the biggest thing is the noise. I always say to people, just imagine everything in your house is being shaken up. So every pot, every pan, every plate, every cup, every glass, everything that you own is rattling. And there is just no other noise quite like it. People say it's like a train or an aeroplane landing, but to me, it was all those belongings. I could just hear my things reverberating around me. And then the earth sort of bounced, and it was recorded as at the time, I think it's been surpassed since, but at the time it recorded the greatest ground acceleration of any earthquake. And that was because it was moving up and down very, very quickly. And so it felt like you were almost on some weird kind of a trampoline, which made it very difficult to walk. So we were soon crawling across the floor to get into a doorway. And so in New Zealand, you're brought up knowing how to deal with an earthquake. It's part of going to school. It's in the phone book. There's all sorts of information. They have you have SES here, we have civil defence. And there's a lot of billboards and posters and everything like that, teaching you how to cope with an earthquake. So you traditionally get in a doorway. There are different thoughts on that now. Some people say you shouldn't, you should get under a piece of furniture or whatever. But anyway, we went for the doorway, and it was a double French doorway. But my son was still in the middle of the room. He'd fallen off his stool, and he was sitting there looking quite sort of flummoxed about what was going on. And he couldn't walk, and I couldn't walk, and it was just this few moments of absolute distress where I realised I'd saved my own skin, but I had failed to rescue him, and managing to get him back under that door frame with us. So that was the start of it, really. We didn't know it, but that was the beginning of the end, really, for that house and for that city for us.
When you say you looked after yourself, but you failed to look after him, I mean, can't you flip that around? My late father always said that survival is the first imperative, and only once you've survived yourself can you look to someone else.
Yeah, well, later I thought it was a bit like when you're flying and they say you should always put your own mask on before you do your children. It was a little bit like that, I guess, but it also shocked me how, I guess that's just a mother's guilt, but yeah, it is that survival imperative, and it just kicks in. And I have heard it from others since. I have heard other people say that they were shocked at how they always thought of themselves as a very protective mother, but put in that kind of situation, we do very much revert to our instinct, which is to survive. And so the memoir is very much about attempting to survive all sorts of different things, as well as earthquakes. And sort of coming at it from a number of different angles. And that was one thing I learned about myself, that I'm not above saving my own skin first.
I suspect I wouldn't be either. I've often, I write a lot about, I have written a lot about the Holocaust, and often, and I've had friends who have been involved in it, and often trying to put yourself in to their shoes, or to try, you think, how would I behave? And I've never been convinced that I would behave either very badly or particularly well. And it's a sobering thought.
It is, and I think it's only for the better that you examine those parts of yourself after that, and sort of, because I think it's very easy to pontificate and say, oh, well, I would have done something else. But it was a bit like there were all these talks at the time of, well, if there's another one, this is what you should do. And we would laugh. There would be things in the media. If there's another earthquake, you should get under this, or you should do that. And we would laugh because you literally have 2 seconds. You can't, if the doorway you have chosen that you're going to get under is on the other side of the house, you're not going to get there. If the best you can do is a coffee table, then that's what you're going to do. So it sort of ties into all of that. You do what you can in the moment with what you have, and you have to forgive yourself in the aftermath if you didn't get it completely right. I was lucky I didn't lose him that day. Given a different style of house, I might have, and this could be a different conversation. But at the same time, it does give me pause to think about, what I'm made of and what I would do in a different situation. Have I learned anything from this, and would I behave any differently a second time? It's just I think it's a useful thing to examine your own life in this way. Yeah.
Taking that and putting it into the current circumstances, that, as you would have seen, as the rest of us have seen, Lismore and Byron Bay are in a mess, and the flood's been devastating. Knowing what you know about natural disasters, what thoughts do you have for the people there, or what thoughts do you have generally about how this is unfolding?
Oh, gosh, so many. First of all, my hearts go out to them, because I know what it's like to be on the top half of the newspaper, the lead story on the website, and then this will fade. In a month it will fade, and they'll still be dealing with this. I've got friends back in Christchurch 10 years plus on, still dealing with insurance companies. This will be a long road, and they don't yet know how bad it is going to be for them. They're going to struggle. And I think of practical things like there's going to be land that is not insurable after this. Twice in 1 month, the insurance companies are going to run for the hills. So insurance is going to price a lot of people out of their homes, I think. I don't know what the answers are for that. It might be a bit like Christchurch, where areas are considered unlivable and people are moved off. But mainly I think about that long-term effect of trauma, and people who will not be able to sleep if it's raining, and just the stink and the loss of their belongings and all of that. It's going to be really tough. And every time something happens in the news like this, a landslide or another earthquake overseas, I just think it's so unfair. You go through it yourself and you kind of think, great, it's over. And then it happens for someone else and the clock starts at zero again. And you're just like, damn, it's just, when you know what's ahead of them, like, it's almost good that they don't know what's ahead of them in some ways. And we didn't know what was ahead of us, because I don't think we would have held together any better for knowing. But it just seems so unfair. And, the support should have been there for them. The support should have been on the ground as soon as they knew something was up, and it wasn't. And that must just be even worse.
It sounds like talking about this in itself brings back your experience to you. 10 years after the event, is it still very close to you?
Yes, very much. It's like a line in fabric. It marks a sort of time in our family's history where everything shifted. We were settled, we had jobs, we had friends, we had a beautiful home, we lived by the beach, and then all of a sudden it was all broken. It was all broken, and it was a mess, and my husband lost his job. We decided to leave, and we had to start all over. And so I don't think you can, I still struggle with certain things. I've talked about this before. I struggle with comfort. I can't kind of get comfortable in my bed at night, and I think that's a long-standing after effect of the trauma of being woken up with aftershocks all through the night. I can't get back to that. I used to be able to snuggle down in bed at night and feel safe and secure and go off to sleep, and I just don't have that anymore, and I don't feel that coming back. That feels like it's stuck there. So, and I also recognize that you recover from something like this, and you get your new house and you get your new place and you get your kids settled into school and all that sort of practical stuff. And then you have to kind of allow a period of recovery from recovery. And that's what I think to the people up in Lismore and surrounds is it's going to be, this is, you know, I know it's such a long process. And so drying out your house is only the first of it. You know, it's all the other stuff that comes after that is, it takes its toll and leaves its mark. And it has definitely left its mark on our family. One of my daughters, it's not in the book because I wanted to protect her privacy a little bit, but her 16th birthday was the day after the quake. And as we were evacuating, I was texting a friend in the town we were going to and saying, can you organise a birthday cake for her? Because we've just got, there's no birthday here. There's no gift. There's no party. And for, I think this year was the first year she celebrated her birthday.
And how old is she now?
She's 28 now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's, you know, it's left its mark. Yeah.
Are there things that have given you solace in the wake of that? Are there things that were helpful to you in managing a new life or managing the aftermath? Absolutely.
I learned a number of things. One, first and foremost, I can trust myself to survive just about anything. That was a revelation. You know, I came from a family where my brother and my sister both died young. My dad died young. And to realize that I'd come through something pretty horrendous and was still standing. My marriage was still intact. My kids, I think the kids coped remarkably well. And I like to take a little credit for that we didn't panic. And so they just sort of kept boxing on. But mostly I think I learned that people are good. People are really, really good, and people will support you. And that my faith in humanity, I don't think will ever be shaken after that experience. People came and helped us with our house, helped us, complete strangers, like they are in Lismore right now. That, you know, people showing up with shovels and wheelbarrows and what have you. Yeah, people are inherently good. People want to help, and I want to help too, so I know that within myself. So I recognized that when other people showed up on my doorstep and said, you know, let us come in and rip your carpets up for you. So that, yeah, whenever something like this happens, I always think, you know, it's okay, we will pull together. As bad as it looks and sometimes as divided as we seem, when it comes down to it, we'll pull each other through these things.
The other part of your book is a very personal account of your family, and you've foreshadowed already that you were one of three. And set the scene for your childhood. Where did you grow up, and where were you placed in this three?
So I was the eldest of three, myself, a sister, and then a youngest brother. And we grew up in the bottom half of the North Island. And it was a chaotic kind of upbringing. And I don't think I really registered that until I was much older. It just was normal. And I think everybody feels that about their upbringing until they get a bit older and they start to compare notes with other adults. My parents had a very volatile relationship. They both had their faults, as is often the case, but it was chaotic. It was loud, sometimes violent. And really that thread of the book is about the aftershocks of that, how that played out for these three children, because we were assigned very particular roles. I was the golden child. I was the one who did best at school, and I was supposed to perform and provide a focus for pride for the family. My sister Meredith was the scapegoat. So she was the one that was to blame for everything. If something went wrong, it was always her fault. She was sort of rejected on a regular basis and cast out. And my brother, Paul, was kind of a runner. He kept himself under the radar. He was a good boy. He kept quiet, stayed out of trouble. But my father had a lot of trouble with him because he was such a quiet, sensitive boy. My dad was really hard on him. Dad was a macho, drinker, hunter, fisherman, you know, the sort of outdoorsy, sports blokey type of guy. Toxic masculinity, I guess they call it these days. And my brother was very sweet, very shy, very artistic and quiet, and he did not measure up. So the upshot was that my dad died young, and then I lost my brother, and then I don't know how much you want me to say, Suzanne, but then I lost my sister. And so these 3 deaths caused me to reflect on all that had happened and how this had happened. I really sort of stood there at my sister's graveside, because she was the last one, and wondered how the heck this happened. This was, to the outside world, a good family. You know, we looked good. We were pretty well off. We had a nice house. We went on holiday every year. My father had his own business. How did we end up so decimated? And at the same time, I was struggling with my relationship with my mother, because at some level I felt like she'd contributed to this outcome. And how was I to go on having a relationship with her after all that had happened? So it was in that sort of state of reckoning that I started thinking about writing. And I think the decision to move away from my mother gave me the freedom to explore that creatively, that I couldn't have done that if I'd remained in touch with her.
And you remain estranged from your mother, is that correct?
Correct, yes.
Has that been a painful or even a soothing thing? How would you describe that state?
Well, I ended up in therapy right after my sister died, and the prognosis was that I'd spent the previous 20 years grieving that relationship. So that by the time I decided that it was over, I was done, I'd tried everything. I had grieved it in every possible way. I'd written letters and burned them. You know, I'd done all that stuff. I'd done all that sort of processing. And the therapist said, you know, you're pretty good to go. You're not distressed. You're just needing a little bit of validation that it's okay. You're okay to make this decision. So I think it was like a long, protracted process, and it was extremely painful at times. The rejection and the hurt could be scarifying, but when it came to the actual break, it felt like the right thing to do, because there had just been so much that had come before. So it was a natural sort of progression as far as I was concerned. And so when I finally did decide that was it, I was going to estrange myself. I was going to choose my own mental health and my own peace. That was very freeing, and I settled down a lot as a person. I became much more aware of my own ability to take care of myself. I didn't need a mother necessarily to feel good about myself. I actually did better without her. So as sad as that might sound to some people, that's actually a win for me, because I'm not looking for something that is not being offered to me. I'm now able to give that to myself, and I'm able to find validation in other things. I don't need a mother to validate me. I can use my creativity. I can talk to my husband. I can do that in other ways. I can self-soothe. So it's been a huge growth. And I sometimes think if she met me now, she wouldn't recognize me, because I am quite different.
It's there's a lot of sobering things in your book, but it's not overall for me a sad book. What it is a very thoughtful book, which is divided into a particularly interesting structure. And I just wanted to ask you first of all about how the book's structured. Tell me how you came about that structure and what it is.
Sure. How did I come about it? I think, well, it started when a friend said that when my father died, it was like an earthquake in my family. And I thought, there's something in that. And that was when I really started to put the two story ideas together. then I started reading more memoir, and I found some that were written in this fragmented structure, and I thought that's kind of cool because, you know, earthquakes create fragments, and that seemed to be quite appropriate. So I did some more reading, and I just found that the way I write naturally falls into that style, or at least when I write nonfiction. There's something about the memories when you're raised in that kind of chaotic environment that fractures your memories anyway. You get little glimpses, you get bits and pieces, but you don't have a smooth, continuous narrative about your childhood. You just get bits and pieces, and I'm sure that's, you know, a self-protective mechanism. So there were just stories that I had here and there, and once I sort of wrote them and laid them out, and I could see where they connected and where they fit together, where the themes are overlaid. And so I did that, and then I sort of laid them all out, and I was doing a manuscript development program, and I spoke to Pip McGuinness, who was a publisher at the time, and I remember going to her and saying, "Is this a little bit, you know, kind of out there, the way I've written it in this fractured format?" And she said, "No, I think it's great, and I think you should actually push it a bit further." And I think it just gave me the confidence I needed to push it. So I came home and I looked at some notes I'd taken, and there was a 5 stages of an earthquake note that I'd made. And I thought, gosh, that actually overlays all of this quite nicely. So that's what I ended up doing. So it's written in the 5 stages of an earthquake in fragments, and it's 2 threads of a story woven together. So it's quite complex. There are a lot of post-it notes involved, a lot of drafts involved. And I ran it by a number of people to check that they could follow, because some people, you know, it's a little different to your linear narrative. It requires something of the reader, I like to think. I hope that it makes them think a little about, like, why is she telling me this now? What's the relevance here? And hopefully they can tease out exactly, well, or their take on why I've put that piece there and not another. So yeah, it's but it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun because I felt like I didn't really know the rules, but I was breaking the rules anyway. And I think with a debut book, you kind of get to do that a little bit sometimes.
It's really beautifully written. I think one of the benefits of having it in such a fragmented way, which is basically sort of small snippets of stories, is that you can pick it up, read some of the stories, put it down and come back again.
I like that about a book.
Yeah, like a bit like poetry, I think, or short stories. And as you say, it's once you get to the end that you want to go back again to think, well, how does this work? I'm mindful of the time. I'm going to hand you over to our book club members. Before I let you go, though, books. What have you been reading, or what do you think we should be reading?
Oh, well, I'm a very eclectic reader. I spend a lot of my time reading craft books because I feel like I left my writing career a little late in life, and so I've got a bit of catching up to do. But I did, and I apologise, I'm a bit half packed up because I'm moving house shortly, but I did run to my bookshelf this evening and see what I could find. So these are not necessarily what I've just read, but they're books that I really love. So this is called The Ticking is the Bomb by Nick Flynn. It's also a memoir written in a fragmented structure, and he writes about 2 very disparate topics and weaves them together. So he was a huge influence on my book, and he writes about the arrival of his first child, so the pregnancy and the birth of his first child, and, wait for it, the torture at Abu Ghraib prison. And you would not think that you could weave those 2 things together, but he does, and it's just an absolute beauty of a book. He's got another memoir, which has the best title, I think, of a book I've ever heard, and it's called Another Bullshit Night in Suck City. So he's really interesting. His dad was a bit of a nutter, and and left him and his mum and brother when he was quite young, and his mother shot herself through the heart when he was quite young. So you can tell he's still sort of processing all of that. So I feel like I just really like him. Yeah. And this one, so
you're just going to choose Flynn authors?
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's true. I hadn't thought of that.
So we've got another Flynn.
This is Gillian Flynn, who wrote, what is it again?
Sharp Objects.
No, the other one, the one that the famous with the movie.
Gone Girl.
Gone Girl, that's it, yes. And I just love this book. It's Southern Gothic, and it's her debut, and it's one of the few books that I'm pretty fussy about my books, and this one I couldn't wait to get to bed at night to keep reading it. It's that sort of book. Just loved it. It's really cool. And this one I've just read because I'm writing a Gothic fiction novel now, and this is an anthology of colonial Australian Gothic fiction, and it ranges from 18 short stories, ghost stories probably is how you'd put it, 1859 to 1914 or 20 something. Wow. Really early stuff, and it's just so evocative of the time, and just so really interesting how complex the thinking was. I don't know why, but I always expect the early stuff to be kind of simple, and it's just lovely. It's really lyrical, some of it, and it's very much about place, which I, as a New Zealander, I found really useful. So those are my.
Oh, they're great. Great recommendations. Thank you so much. We've got a couple of minutes now. If anyone needs to go, I know that I say it's half an hour, so if you need to go. But otherwise, questions, and I think you can actually unmute and just I'll look for maybe hands up. Is there a hands up for any questions? Marianne, yes. Do you want to unmute Marianne? I think we can manage the hordes.
Yeah, I have. Sorry, I was trying to type, which is why. I'm just really interested, Michelle, two beautiful, difficult stories to tell. Was there a point at which you made or tried to make a conscious decision to survive, the aftermath of the various traumas, your childhood and of course the earthquake, and try and take control of it rather than it control you? I'm wondering if there was a moment at which you decided to navigate your way through this in a particular way, or was it just a sort of organic evolution of sort of post-traumatic recovery, really? You know what I mean?
Yeah, thanks, Marianne. I think it's who I am as a result of how I grew up.
Yeah.
I think when you say an evolution, that word sort of jumped out at me then. I think, yes, I've often wondered what it would have been like to grow up in a quieter home where there wasn't that going on. And the closest I can get to knowing what that's like is to know my husband, who grew up lavished with love, was a late baby, was a boy baby, and he's Chinese, so that was extremely important. He was born on the 8th of the 8th, both lucky numbers. So he's a bit special, eldest son of eldest son of eldest son, all of that. So he was, lucky star. And even now, he speaks to his mum every morning, and he married me, and I was not a good choice as far as they were concerned. And yet she still loved him through all of that, through her displeasure and her outright disapproval. She loved him through it. And I compare that with what I and my siblings had, and it's found wanting. And I think if I look at that makes me realize, who I am. I have developed certain reactions. So if someone starts yelling, I'm out the door, for example. So that to me is survival, right? That's just something I learned. And in some ways, maybe that's helped me get through the earthquakes. If I'd been wrapped in cotton wool my whole life, I might have fallen apart. But I kind of knew I had the grit to just keep going if I could just wake up every morning. So I don't know I hope that answers your question. I don't think there was a particular moment. I think it just ends up being who you are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was there another question? I'm just scrolling along for some hands. So
I've told them everything.
You told them everything. It's interesting. Just before we close, just taking up Marianne's question, the interesting thing about Marianne's novel Here in the After is it's the story of a woman who finds herself in a siege situation, and her friendship then with a man who's been a soldier in Afghanistan and comes back. So a sort of overlaying of post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yeah, interesting, yeah.
And I suppose, like, yeah, the interesting question, I suppose, for anyone is how do you manage that, and what skills do you have to manage it?
I really think it's minute by minute, and there were some days where I just thought, if I'll just get through the next minute, you know. Look, there are things that aren't in the book, and I can share one small thing with you. We bought a puppy in the middle of the earthquake aftershocks, and I didn't realize, but my anxiety was at such a high level that the added stress of having a puppy and having it pee and poop everywhere and having it cry through the night and lose sleep, I just couldn't cope. And I began having these most horrendous panic attacks that I couldn't breathe. And after about 2 weeks, we had to rehome the puppy. It was the only solution. And as soon as it left, as soon as it went in the back of someone else's car and was driven away, and went to a really good home, I have to say, went to a little girl in a wheelchair who just wanted something that would go and fetch something when she threw it from her wheelchair. So that was lovely. But, you know, I was just a heaving mess, and they drove away, and I just went, oh, decompression. So that's all fine. That's great. We get here, we buy a house. First thing I want to do is get a dog. I used to work in a dog sanctuary and that sort of thing. So I want to get a dog. I get a dog, and the same thing happens. There's no earthquakes, but I'm having the most violent panic attacks I've had ever. And I had to rehome a second dog because that wiring is still in my brain, and I haven't yet managed to undo it yet. So, you know, there's just all sorts of things that you carry, and you're fine. You're getting on with your life. You're functioning. You're parenting. You're doing everything you should. But I'm aware of there's still bits of me that are a little bit broken that at some point I'll get the time to address.
Maybe.
If I live long enough.
Stay away from dogs for a while.
I love dogs. That's the weirdest thing. It's just that the response, it triggers me, you know, and I know that words I've used these days, but it literally triggers me. It sends my brain back to coping with earthquakes and house flood and all of that stuff. And it's nothing to do with the dog.
No, just take the dogs from the RSPCA for a walk instead.
Yeah, good idea. Good idea.
I did actually, yeah. I was a dog walker for many years. Yeah. So, it's just so complex.
Well, thank you, Michelle, for sharing.
Yes,
I'm going to ask
Thank you, Michelle.
Before you go, I'm going to ask one more thing of you, Michelle. Can you give me a number between 1 and 9, please?
Well, it has to be 8, doesn't it?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll tell you why. This is my my very high-tech raffle, which is that you give me a number, I count down to see what number that is, and lucky for Jade St. Clair, she's the winner. So Jade, I think you've got my email, or if you don't, it's on my website. You know, it's Suzanne@SuzanneLeal.com. You send me an email, and we'll sort out your prize.
Oh wow, thank you so much. That's very exciting. Thank you.
It's all very exciting, isn't it, for a Thursday night? Terrific. Look, thank you very much, everybody, for coming today. And Michelle, thank you for it's truly a beautifully written book, and I look forward to your Gothic novel when it
Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.